3 continents, 7 seas, and a 600-year monarchy. From the streets of Baghdad to the gates of Vienna, from the snowy regions of Crimea to the scorching deserts of Arabia, there was only one name across the world, one passion, and yes, only one fear in the heart of the enemy, the Ottomans. They who changed the course of history, who brought an end to the Eastern Roman Empire, they who were considered the sword of Islam. But a small tribe fleeing from the fear of the Mongols. How did it become a world superpower? And then, that superpower, which had the most dangerous army in the world, how did it become the sick man of Europe? This story is not of a few years, it is a journey longer than 6 centuries. You might say in today's 2026, what is the need to know this history? Because the decisions of this empire are still affecting our lives today. The world we live in today, today's Middle East, today's Palestine. In fact, the entire Muslim world today stands on the corpse of that very Ottoman Empire. But wait a minute. Understand one thing clearly, in this video, we will not go into too much detail in any segment. Because this entire period from 1299 to 1922 is a period of more than 600 years, which should be discussed in great detail. All the important sultans of this era, the events of their time, deserve separate, detailed accounts of their own. But there is still much that remains to be told, and it will be told in time. So without any further delay, let's begin the story of the Ottoman Empire. The story of the Ottoman Empire does not begin in a magnificent palace. Its beginning was from a tent, and that too in a war zone. These were the last days of the 13th century. The Mongol storm was advancing from the east and was destroying every army, every city, every country in its path. Cities and villages were burning, turning into piles of ash, and towers of human skulls were being erected there. This was the same era when the Eastern Roman Empire was also taking its last breaths. And right in the middle of these two was a small Turkish tribe which was migrating. What was its destination? There were only 2 paths: either be finished at the hands of the Mongols, or do something that would make the impossible possible. The chief of this tribe was Ertuğrul. He was the one who decided that he would settle in a place right between the Mongols and the Roman Empire, which would be out of the firing range of both. This was a very dangerous decision, but it changed everything. The Kayi tribe found a place to live in the small region of Skut in western Anatolia, a little far from the Mongols but very close to the Crusaders. Ertuğrul had a son named Osman. One night he saw in a dream that a tree was growing out of his chest and rising towards the sky, until it overshadowed the entire world. Under this tree were many rivers and seas, entire cities and settlements from where the sounds of the Adhan were rising. Osman's eyes opened, the dream was over, but it settled in his heart and lived on. Osman laid the foundation of an empire, which was called the Ottoman Empire after his name. A small state, but its ambitions were very big. Following in his footsteps, his son Orhan moved forward, and for the first time, the Ottomans set foot in Europe. They were becoming an important power very close to the Eastern Roman Empire. They were becoming a power. But the one who pushed them towards becoming a superpower was the 4th Sultan, Bayezid I, a formidable warrior king, whom the world called Yildirim, meaning thunderbolt. Bayezid the Thunderbolt was so fast that one moment he would be fighting in Europe, and a few days later he would be seen in Asia. Europe became so afraid of him that in 1396, they planned to send an allied army to finish the Ottoman Empire forever. But in the Battle of Nicopolis, Bayezid defeated this Crusader army so badly that the whole of Europe was shaken. Now Bayezid's eyes were on Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, the city about which it was said that the ruler of the world is the one who rules this city. And before Bayezid's lightning could strike this city, a storm arose from the east, which had turned everything from Delhi to Damascus into ashes. The name was Timur the Lame. In July 1402, that battle took place between Timur and Bayezid Yildirim. which should not have happened at all, because it was not a battle of two kings, it was a battle of their egos, a war of ego. Timur was intoxicated with his power, while Bayezid was in his own ecstasy. And right on the battlefield, where the situation was already not in Bayezid's favor, due to the betrayal of the Tatar soldiers, the Ottomans were defeated. That Bayezid, who until yesterday was frightening all of Europe, not only lost the war but was also captured. Timur took him as a prisoner. It is said that Timur kept Bayezid locked in an iron cage. But such things are just stories, they have no connection with reality. These stories were also mostly spread by European historians, who were very happy about Bayezid's defeat. The Sultan captured, the army destroyed, and the empire gone. For 11 years there was no Ottoman Empire on the world map. In history, this is called the Ottoman Interregnum, the period of hiatus. A warrior king like Bayezid could not bear the humiliation of captivity, and he passed away within a few months. Here, a fight began among his sons Suleiman I and Musa and Mehmed to obtain the throne. Europe was celebrating that the Turks were finished, the calamity was averted. But they did not know that a spark was still alive under these ashes. Bayezid's son Mehmed I, and then his son Murad II, made the impossible possible. They rebuilt a broken state. In fact, Murad defeated the allied armies of Europe not once but twice. In 1444 at Varna and in 1448 at Kosovo, and that too so badly that Europe understood the lion was not dead. It was only wounded, and a wounded lion is more dangerous. The comeback of the Ottomans is considered one of the greatest turnarounds in history. It is very rare to see an empire completely finished and then rebuilt, until it becomes so large that it becomes the most powerful empire in the world of its time. But to reach here, there was a river of fire that had to be crossed, and its name was Constantinople, the last remnant of the Eastern Roman Empire. For 800 years, one after another Muslim ruler tried to become the conqueror of Constantinople. And then came the turn of that son of Sultan Murad II, whom everyone had once written off. The one who was placed on the throne at the age of 12, but could not manage the government. The Sultan had to come back from retirement and take over the government again, just because the prince had failed miserably. There could be no greater humiliation than this, that someone is made a king from a prince and then demoted back to the position of a prince. And this boy vowed that he would answer this humiliation with a victory that no one had ever seen. He returned at the age of 19 and did what no one had been able to do until then. The world today knows him by the name of Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror. Now the greatest war, the greatest success, the greatest victory was about to begin. Constantinople was not just a city, it was a bone stuck in the throat of the Ottoman Empire. In those days, half the empire was in Europe, half in Asia, and right in the middle, the city was stuck like a dagger. Mehmed II told his viziers clearly, "Either I will conquer Istanbul, or Istanbul will conquer me." And with this zeal, this passion, began the greatest siege in history. Mehmed was now going to do what his forefathers could not do. But at the same time, it was a do-or-die situation for the Sultan. If he turned back, he would again be called that same 12-year-old boy, a weak king, a failed prince. And he did not want that at all, so he did what no one had even thought of. The Sultan had an idea. He said, "If we cannot find a way through the sea, then we will sail ships over land." On the night of April 21st, the Ottomans cut down the forest, and by smearing oil and fat on wooden planks, they dragged their 70 naval ships by land route into the Golden Horn of Constantinople. When the people and guards of the city woke up in the morning, their eyes remained wide open. The chain was in its place, but the Ottoman ships were standing near the harbor. Now there was an uproar in the city. The city had been surrounded from two sides, something that had never happened before. But still, immediate success was not achieved. The siege continued until the sun rose on May 29, 1453. After a 53-day siege, the Sultan ordered the final assault on the city. The walls that had blocked the path of Islam for 800 years finally collapsed. The 21-year-old Mehmed entered the city riding a horse, entered its main place of worship, Hagia Sophia, and performed the first prostration there. Constantinople had now become Islambal, the city of Islam. The Ottomans were no longer just a state. They had become an empire, and Mehmed was no longer just Mehmed II. He had become Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, the conqueror of Constantinople, Caesar of Rome. The most important role in the conquest of Constantinople was played by the elite force, the Janissaries, the same army that launched the final and decisive attack. Who were they? This was the standing army created by Orhan. An army that is not just called upon in times of need, it is not made up of common people, but is a specially trained force that receives a regular salary for this work. It was a formidable war machine. The Ottomans had built this system based on merit. It's another matter that this merit was rooted not in freedom, but in slavery. How, whenever slaves were captured after a war, the intelligent, healthy, and talented boys among them were separated. They were brought to the capital, converted to Islam, and then given such rigorous training that they became the best part of the state. Those who were sharp in reading and writing went into the bureaucracy. Some even reached the highest post of Grand Vizier. And those who were physically strong were included in the Janissaries. The boys included in this army had no father, no mother, no family. They had only one father, the Sultan. And in the Sultan's eyes, there's only one thing that mattered above all, the state. So much so that Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror made a striking law. Whichever of my sons Allah grants the empire, it is permissible for him to eliminate his brothers for the betterment of the world order. This was the Ottoman law of fratricide, the law of brother killing. But why? What was the fault of the brothers after all? You can blame the system of monarchy for this. Because after the death of any king, his son becomes the ruler, so for one throne, all the sons become mortal enemies of each other, and a civil war begins. The conqueror reasoned that if the brothers remained alive, there would be a civil war, thousands of people would die. The empire would break apart, so it was better that one or two princes die, but the empire would be saved. This is perhaps the most severe way to save a state, because of this very law, later sultans had 19 brothers killed on the same day. One brother would sit on the throne, wear the crown, and on the same day, dozens of funerals would be carried out from his own house. This was an open declaration that the interest of the state was greater than the life of any human being, even if it was the life of an innocent person. This system was severe but effective, because on this strong yet bloody foundation, the empire was about to reach its zenith. After the West, now the era of conquests in the East was about to begin. A sultan was about to arrive whose policy was completely different. One who believed the Ottomans could never fully advance in Europe as long as Iran and Egypt remained unchecked in the East. This was Selim I, the one who made the Ottomans the rulers of all the Muslims of the world. They became the caliphs. East Mehmed the Conqueror had broken the door of the West, but the East still remained. To control which a sultan was needed who was more formidable than a lion. And the Ottomans found that sultan in Selim I, whom the Turks themselves call Yavuz, meaning the grim. Selim ruled for only 8 years, but in these 8 years, he changed the map of the world. He did not turn towards Europe like his forefathers, he turned towards the East and South. Because here there were two powers he considered the biggest obstacle for the Ottomans. The Safavid dynasty of Iran and the Mamluks of Egypt. First in 1514, Selim I badly defeated Shah Ismail of Iran at the Battle of Chaldiran, effectively breaking Iran's power in the region. Then he took his cannons to Egypt, where the Mamluks had been ruling for centuries. After conquering Syria and Palestine in 1517, Selim also captured Cairo. And it was here that he found a treasure greater than any throne and crown in the world. The mantle of the caliphate, the swords and flags of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, which were held by the last Abbasid caliph in Cairo, were handed over to Sultan Selim, and thus the caliphate passed from the Abbasids to the Ottoman dynasty. The original spiritual concept of the caliphate had already been diluted long before this. Now whoever held the most power could shift the caliphate to his own family by the point of a sword. And Selim did not hide this fact. He said plainly, "What is mere spiritual status? The caliphate should belong to the one who is powerful, who is worthy of it." This was a turning point, because from here on, the Ottomans were no longer just a Turkish empire. They had become the Ottoman Caliphate, the rulers of all the Muslims of the world. Now Istanbul was not just a capital, it was the seat of the caliphate, and Selim the first caliph of the Ottoman dynasty. Mecca, Medina, and Al-Quds, all three holy places of the Muslims, were with them. His grandfather had called himself Caesar of Rome, but the grandson took the title, servant of the two holy sanctuaries. When Selim's reign ended, the Ottomans had everything. Rule across 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and Africa, overflowing treasuries, and the spiritual leadership of all the Muslims of the world through the caliphate. This was the beginning of a magnificent era. The era of the ruler known as Suleiman the Magnificent, when the golden age of the Ottoman Empire began. The year 1520, a ruler sat on the throne of the Ottomans whose name was Suleiman I, known to the world as Suleiman the Magnificent, who achieved one success after another. His armies advanced like a storm, Hungary in the west, Crimea in the north, all the territory up to Algeria in the southwest, and Iraq in the east became part of the empire. During his reign, all the holy places of the Muslims came under Ottoman rule, after Mecca, Medina, and Al-Quds, Najaf, and Karbala too. Suleiman's armies advanced further still. In 1529 they reached the heart of Europe, Vienna. Suleiman ruled the land, and at sea, his admiral Hayreddin Barbarossa established Ottoman rule across the Mediterranean and its islands. Suleiman's greatness was not just a matter of his sword, not just his commanders and armies, but on his right and left were 2 people who made this era the Golden Age. One was Ibrahim Pasha, a Greek slave who became the Sultan's friend in childhood, and then the most powerful Grand Vizier of the empire. But power tends to make a man blind. Ibrahim began to consider himself so powerful that he started referring to himself as Sultan. And this is perhaps why one night he was quietly assassinated. This was the real face of politics, a bitter truth that a sultan has no friends. The second person was Mimar Sinan, who created masterpieces like the Suleimani Mosque, and in fact defined the style of architecture that remains Turkey's trademark even today. Suleiman passed away, the kings who followed him passed away, and today, more than a century after the Ottoman Empire ended, the domes built by Sinan still stand. The call to prayer is still heard from their minarets 5 times a day. It is often said that your rise is the beginning of your fall. Suleiman ruled for 46 years. In every respect a magnificent era, but this was also the era in which something took root that shaped a dangerous future. It was not the defeat at Vienna, nor the failure at Malta. It was a game played inside the palace, one that later shook the foundations of the empire. The central figure in this game was Sultan Suleiman's favorite consort, Hurrem Sultan. She was brought from the regions of present-day Ukraine, but the Sultan fell for her and married her. The queen then broke every old convention of the harem and began the era known as the Sultanate of Women, meaning decisions were no longer made in the divan, not in the court, but in the closed rooms of the harem. The world saw a chilling glimpse of this during Suleiman's reign, when the first target became the crown prince, Prince Mustafa, a hero, the favorite of the public and the army, and the rightful heir to the throne. But Hurrem Sultan wanted her own son, Selim II, to sit on the throne, not Mustafa. A conspiracy was set in motion against Mustafa. Doubt was gradually planted in the Sultan's mind until history witnessed the scene, when a father, based only on suspicion, summoned his most capable son to his tent. Mustafa went believing he was going to meet his father, but inside the tent, it was not the Sultan, but silent executioners waiting for him. On the Sultan's order, the 36-year-old Mustafa was killed. The Sultan won, the Queen won, but the empire lost, because Mustafa's death was not just the death of a prince. It was the announcement of the death of the Ottomans' future, because the one who took the throne in Mustafa's place. History does not remember as Selim II, but as Selim the Drunkard. No one saw it at the time, but the decline of the great empire had begun, because palace conspiracies were now overtaking merit. The empire slowly began to sink into the mire. And the biggest sign of this was a cage.